Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Republican strategist and former state communications director for House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Brittany Martinez. Brittany, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me back.
We are sitting here about 12 hours from the end of a historic night, first meeting and first debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. First, what are your takeaways?
I think last night was really interesting. I think that ultimately what the debate is going to be is sort of how it made you feel, because we didn't really get into the policy. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think that she did far superior than him. And I'm a Republican. I want Republicans to do well. But I think it was a stark contrast between the two.
Let's talk about that, because there were a lot of policy questions, but questions that she might not want to have answered. She did a really good job of pivoting away from them. She would say something in the middle of that answer to kind of goad Trump. And it seemed like a lot of the time he would take the bait and he would get off topic. Do you think, A, we got a good sense of policy from either candidate last night? And B, how much does that matter to voters?
I think policy is always important. I mean, it's a debate, so it's never supposed to really be too much in the weeds unless it's like about a specific topic area or issue area. People care, but and you're not going to say, I'm going to divert X amount of funds from this legislation to cover the cost of this, and right, like it's generally more top line. But I think we're in the post-Labor Day stretch. People are starting to pay attention, and you're right. I mean, the very first question out the gate for the vice president was, is the economy better than it was 4 years ago? And she gave a very roundabout answer and didn't say yes or no. The same can be said about the former President Trump when he was asked about Ukraine and whether we should be supporting Ukraine and if we want them to win in the war against Russia. And there wasn't very much a straight answer there. So I think people are starting to pay attention, definitely.
Do you think President Trump effectively tied Vice President Kamala Harris to the Biden administration, to those weak spots that President Biden felt in his campaign, like immigration, like the economy, like inflation?
I definitely think that there is an argument to be made that obviously that whatever the president has done, President Biden is also a reflection of Vice President Harris. And yes, I mean, I think the economy is a top issue for Americans everywhere. And so you're able to bring that home and hammer that point home, that why hasn't it gotten better under the vice president? Why are we waiting until after the election, if you are to become president, to be able to fix all of these things? So yes, I do think that he did make some fair points of, well, you're in a position right now of power to make these changes, but you haven't. So why would you be able to do so? But then also, she is the vice president, not the president. So though, of course, she is at the top of the helm in American politics, she is not the president of the United States. So there's obviously an argument to be made on that side too.
The strategists, the political scientists that I've talked to have all said that this is a change campaign. Who can be the best change agent? And it's really interesting because we have an incumbent vice president and we also have someone who was president 4 years ago. But during the debate, Donald Trump was still relitigating the 2020 election results. He didn't denounce January 6th, amongst other things. Do you think he did an effective job of showcasing himself as a change agent? And do you think those topics are winnable messages, winnable strategies for Republicans?
I don't think that he came across as a change agent, and it was very much focused on the things of the past. And so when we're talking about January 6th, for example, and some of the other things that you brought up, like the election results, right? He even said that he was being sarcastic when he said, oh, we only lost by a sliver, and I don't think that is helpful for our democracy. I don't think that is a good message here that Republicans need to be pushing. I don't think that moves our country forward. And so though he was literally a change agent in this moment because he's not in power, I do think that he kind of tends to look more at the past and sort of what the future would look like. And I think that we saw some of that come forward in sort of fear-mongering rhetoric. And it's like, I'm the best, and look at how bad they are, and they're the worst. And there wasn't really any substance in some of that messaging, which I think is a disservice to the American people because they deserve answers from both candidates.
What do you wish that the messaging was last night? Less of that fear-mongering rhetoric, less of the past? I mean, what did you want to hear last night that you didn't?
Yeah, I think something that would have been helpful to hear from both sides is sort of what our country's going to look like moving forward. And so obviously the vice president, when she was speaking yesterday, she's made herself, I think, more so made a case of being a change agent and said, like, this is what the past is. He's focused on the path. I'm focused on moving us forward. I think that is very helpful to her, right? I think that Americans are now just starting to tune in. And when you see someone who's sort of being optimistic versus what I think what the former president did was not be that optimistic. He was a little bit more negative. I think that in order for him to be more successful, he's going to have to be more optimistic about the future. And what he says is like, I would love, he went into the spin room yesterday and he's like, I would love to be optimistic, but we're not in a position right now as a country to be optimistic. However, I don't think that wins campaigns. I think people want hope and something to look forward to. And so, my encouragement to their team would be like, you need to pivot your messaging on this and why I think our greatest days are always ahead, and maybe that's more of the messaging rather than being so negative in this moment.
Recent polling in this election shows Harris and Trump in a dead heat. It's really anybody's race, but a place that Harris has a sizable lead is with women. And the topic of abortion came up, so I'd love to get your reaction on both candidates' responses. During the debate, Harris spoke passionately about horrible situations that women have found themselves in a post-Roe America. She did not say, though, if she would support any abortion restrictions even in later months. Donald Trump didn't definitively say if he would veto an abortion ban, and he said that Democrats would want to execute a baby after it is born. Obviously, that's not true, but what do you think about his response specifically? Do you think it moved the needle at all when it comes to women?
I do not think that he is the right messenger on this topic. Obviously, he was asked a question. He's going to have to respond to it. I think that one especially needs to be more disciplined. It's some issue that we've been talking about pretty extensively over the last few years. And I think if he's going to take a page out of anybody's playbook, it should be Nikki Haley. She has a great answer when it comes to this and where the future of the Republican Party is going to be on the topic of abortion issues and pro-life issues. And so I think that would be a more effective way to try and be able to hit on those suburban women and be able to bring those folks home. That is one of the most important voting blocks in politics, and I don't know that he necessarily made any headway with them on this issue specifically, but women are also not single issue voters. None of us are and I know voting bloc is a single issue voter. So I think that, of course, women are going to be looking at other answers as well, but this is a hot topic right now, and I think he needs to reel that answer in a little bit.
It's interesting, the mood and temperament of the debate the day after, this time opposed to June. I was talking to a Democrat after the debate, and they said that I feel like a Trump supporter did back in June because the tides have shifted. There is this overarching sense that Harris came out of that debate victorious. Do you think that this debate for Trump was as devastating as the June one was for Biden? And what's the course correction here for Trump?
I don't think it was as devastating. I don't think it was great. I also don't think his performance last time around was that great. It was just in comparison to Biden, he did way better, heads and shoulders better. But that, debate led Biden to dropping out, right? So that's not necessarily a ringing endorsement of his performance. Obviously Republicans aren't going to take the same path. He's the nominee for the party. But I think that a way to course correct is perhaps don't bring in, Matt Gaetz and Laura Loomer to prepare you for debates, because you could tell the difference between the two, who took the debate prep seriously, right? Maybe actually bring in operatives who have that experience, who are experts in this. If you are to do another debate moving forward, which I think the American people deserve. And I think that's probably one of the best things that he can do is sort of take it more seriously. He's a very confident person. And the trailer for his new movie, or the movie about him, just came out yesterday. And one of the things, and I don't know whether this is true or not, it's a movie, right? But it's never apologize or never admit defeat, or always be confident. And I think that those are sort of things that are part of his nature that we can very much see. And I think it's human and vulnerable in a good way to be able to admit when you've done wrong, or to course correct and be able to articulate that, this is how I felt, this is how I feel now. Our feelings are allowed to evolve and change.
You bring up a really interesting sentiment of Trump didn't necessarily win June's debate. President Biden's performance, that was what has been described as disastrous, really overshadowed it. So he was handed that win instead. But right after the debate last night, Harris's team said she would debate him again. Donald Trump on Fox said he wasn't sure if he wanted to debate again. Strategically, do you think it would benefit Trump to get on the stage and debate Harris once more?
That's a good question. I mean, would I love to see it? Of course. If I was on the campaign, would I recommend it? 50-50, I guess, maybe. Maybe depending on the day or, how well he's been doing on messaging in like the immediate past. But he, and I think maybe we talked about this last time, right? Like, he is a vivacious character. People like that about him. There were moments yesterday where you did kind of get to see that personality, but it's not when he's really talking specifically about policy issues. It was when he was talking about rally sizes. It was when he was saying these immigrants are eating pets. So perhaps if he can channel that energy into something that is actually useful, yes. But also, we know him to be that sort of candidate. So that's what I would be doing if I were on his team, is like, messaging, and energy. I think I was talking to someone last week, and I said, I think the two things he needed to do in order to be successful at the same time is to have focus and energy, and I don't think that he was able to totally deliver in that, and I stand on that. I think that he needs that moving forward if he is to debate again.
From this conversation, I'm getting the sense that you feel, this debate wasn't really good for Donald Trump, but it wasn't campaign ending like it was for President Biden back in June. Do you think this is going to affect the election in November? And as a Republican more broadly, are you concerned about this potentially affecting other races like Senate races, House races?
Yeah, I think that's always a concern about what's going to happen down ballot. Republicans, we lost the House in 2018. We lost the Senate in 2020. We barely got this House back in 2022 by the skin of our teeth, and that is because Kevin McCarthy was the most prolific fundraiser the House has ever seen. Still don't have the Senate, and so we keep losing all of these elections, and what is the one common denominator is who is at the top of the ticket or who is in the White House at the time. And so I think that's a huge concern that we should be worried about.
After the debate last night, there was a surprise endorsement for Vice President Kamala Harris, and that was Taylor Swift. She said she watched the debate, she endorsed the vice president, and at the end, she signed off with a dig at J.D. Vance, calling herself a childless cat lady. What do you think about this endorsement? And as a Republican, does this concern you, given the star power that Taylor Swift really has and really has with Gen Z and women?
I love Taylor Swift. I don't know that I consider, I've never been to a concert, so I don't know if I'm like a true Swiftie. It's just so hard to get the tickets, right? But, I don't know if like a Taylor Swift endorsement or like a Beyonce or an Oprah or anything, I don't know that moves the needle all that much. I actually think that's problematic for Democrats. We saw that last time around, right? Like Katy Perry made Hillary Clinton like a POTUS necklace, and those sorts of things are kind of cringy and people are kind of turned off by it. But also, to your question earlier that I didn't fully answer, and thank you, I'm sorry about that, I remember now, is if the debates are going to move the needle at all. And I think where we are now is that post-Labor Day stretch, and we already talked about, but also conventions typically tend to be partisan, right? So you're tuning in if you're Republican for the Republican one or the Dem one for if you're a Democrat. And now people are paying attention, and they say like she's being introduced to the world. I don't totally buy that because she has been vice president for the last 3.5 years, but if we're now at a moment where these sorts of things are going to start moving the needle, and I think that the debate will. I'm not saying it's going to be 20 points, but those independents, those swing voters, those people in the middle who are still unsure, I think those are the folks who are tuning in and starting to pay attention now.
Well, we have less than 60 days till Election Day and a lot to discuss between now and then. I hope you come back on soon and discuss the state of the race with me. Brittany Martinez, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me back.